This He-Man is a bit loose with the limbs. Here's your look at the Mattel Master Universe Origins Flying Fists He-Man. Never really an easy way to open these. Save the comic. This He-Man figure features an attack capability for even more intense play, and comes with extra accessories and swappable parts, including a special extra head. Master Universe fans and collectors will appreciate the authentic styling that mirrors the original 1980s Motu characters, while adding modern design elements. First, before looking at Flying Fist He-Man, let's bring in the tape measure just to see how tall the figure stands. By now, if enough of you have been collecting this line, you know that a He-Man figure is standard size. So this He-Man really isn't that far different from the other He-Mans we've looked at earlier. Still though, the figure's about 5¼ inches in height, or it's a figure that's about a little over 13 centimeters tall. For the sake of the ever-important comparisons, let's bring in the version 1 He-Man so you can see what it looks like next to Flying Fist He-Man. I have not yet changed the head sculpt on the version 1 He-Man just because I already picked up the version 2 He-Man. It's the exact same body. I usually keep both of them on display. That's a lot of information that I think none of you really needed in the first place. But anyways, here's what He-Man also looks like next to the Battle Armor He-Man. And it becomes even more apparent now looking at how better they've improved the body here for Flying Fist He-Man, that the Battle Armor He-Man's body, or at least his torso, is way too wide. If you thought that was wide, that seems like that's a joke. Here's also what he looks like next to the Eternian Warriors He-Man. This was the one that came with the battle-ravaged Battle Cat. And while both of them are using the shinier vac-formed chrome, it seems like the Flying Fist He-Man is just a little shinier. And of course he doesn't have the bigger, wider torso either. This new He-Man features, this new comic. The comic does have Flying Fist He-Man here on the front. It does have Horde Troopers behind him, and only just a hinted cues on the front as to who he's actually facing. I wonder who that actually is. On the back, though, advertised new for 2022. The only new ones yet to not look at here on this channel were the Flying Fist He-Man and Terraclaw's Skeletor. His review will be coming up shortly. And then there's also Sorceress, Buzz-Off, not you, that's the name of the character, Stratos, Winged Warrior Stratos, not the original Stratos, and Jitsu, all of which we've already had a look at here on this channel. Shameless plug. Let's look at the interior of the comic. Now, I did purchase this online from a US site. Because of that, it actually does have a read-up telling exactly what's going on. There's Hordak. Look how cool Hordak looks there with his army of Horde Troopers. Gotta get myself some Horde Troopers. So behind on this. And then also you can see there's Skeletor down below there as well. There is the other version of Skeletor that, again, we will be looking at in an upcoming review. I just love the artwork on the inside of these comics. Holding on to all of these, I put them away because I only really have Flying Fist He-Man and Terraclaw's Skeletor. I would imagine that either one of these are going to be the only characters that come included with this specific comic. I could be wrong. Let me know down below in the comments section if I'm wrong. The other thing that comes included also with He-Man is just the swapping out paperwork. The manual to tell you what parts on He-Man can actually be popped out. Because his shoulders are geared towards the mechanism built into the frame of his torso, you can't swap those arms out. You can only swap the hands, the lower boots. I don't know why anyone would, who's thinking to themselves, I need to swap out the boots. Although I did sort of consider that with the Keldor Skeletor, buying another Fisto when he was dirt cheap, and just pillaging the boots from Fisto and use it for that Keldor Skeletor. So I guess I'm a bit of a hypocrite for now saying that. I just don't think it seems like a waste of paper just to include this with all the figures. Anyways, moving on now to the accessories that come included with He-Man. The first thing he comes included with is a 3-ball spinning mace. What I'm doing right now, by the way, is what I was doing for about 15 minutes before I started hitting record. And then I had to remind myself, right, you got to get this recorded. But I was doing this for a while. You want to talk about fidget spinners? This was the original fidget spinner for us kids growing up in the 80s. I don't know how many times kids were doing this. Anyways, I do like the way they've used the vac form chrome here on the front, and then they've actually added the orbs done in gold. What's interesting, though, as you may already notice, only 2 of the orbs are actually a shinier kind of gold color. The other one is a dull And you know what? I actually don't mind the fact it is dull. I kind of wish that it was actually dull on the other sides too, because this is already shiny. I don't feel like adding then the orbs being shiny as well. Maybe it's too much. Maybe the matte gold would have worked better. I gotta get away from doing that. Anyways, this does fit currently into only one of his hands, the other hand being the general relaxed hand that finds their way in all these Masters figures. So basically, you're just going to only take the mace and put it into this one hand. It does add some extra weight, granted, to He-Man's body. And unfortunately, when you're looking at it from this side, well, I mean, more compelled to probably put it on this side of He-Man's body. I know. How can you do that? Hold on a second. We're going to get to that. I think I would rather have it on this side, just because when you're looking at this side, you can see the unfinished portion of the spinning mace. But yeah, if you put it on this side, you're not going to have any bit of that issue. I did notice, like, with both the shield and the mace, let's just put He-Man down here for a second, the plastic feels pretty light. Nothing to the point where it's going to be breaking, but I did notice, like, plastic-wise, it does feel like a little hollow and really super light. If you did want to display this on He-Man without having to put it into his hand, I know that sort of sounds like a riddle, you can actually spin the figure around, and located here on the back, this is the part that actually allows you to hold this and spin He-Man's body back and forth. But you can also then take the mace, and you clamp it on the inside. In a way, it kind of makes it look like he's got propulsion if he's inside water. You can get into a motorboat and just spin away. But that's one place that you can actually store it. It actually is good. It doesn't look too bad from the front of it, although you're going to still be seeing the hollow plastic. The other thing the figure comes also included with, I know we're going to kind of get away from the spinning shield just for one quick second. The figure also comes included with a fully developed, fully grown up power sword. This is the same power sword, I'm just going to bring a couple of right now, that was used for Prince Adam, although Prince Adam's was more the pink color. And we also got ourselves a full sword that came also included with a couple of the He-Mans. I think the Eternian Warriors and Battle Armor He-Man came included with swords that were fully like this. The coloring is not quite the same gray, though. This one actually has, it seems, almost flecks of glitter in there, whereas this sword is just more of a matte. So actually, this actually is a sword that's good, I think, for just displaying with a regular He-Man. Oh, and speaking of which, there was the half power sword that came included with the original He-Man, which of course isn't finished. Anyways, we'll put that to the side. The thing about this, just taking and spinning the figure around here for a second, the mace, what I would have almost done is made the mace wider than what it is. And the reasoning why I say that is because there's no real place that you can take the power sword and put it onto He-Man's body. It's not wide enough here to actually hold and house the sword. If they had made the clip a little bit wider, just enough to accommodate the sword, it would also have meant that they would have to have made this wider too. But if they made this wider and this wider, you would have been able to house both the spinning mace, and you would have had a place to hold the sword as well, because there is really no place right now. You could be somewhat silly and slide it into the loops that way, but I mean, really, I would want to have displayed it this way. It just isn't enough clearance for that. Figure also comes included with a spinning shield. And while maybe it's not as entertaining as the spinning mace, I did spend a fair bit of time doing this also as well. This also feels really hollow plastic. You can see in this case that they've actually used like the gold plastic, and I don't think it's going to be a victim of gold plastic syndrome. That's usually more something that was affecting the Transformers back in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, gold plastic syndrome. Gold plastic usually was more brittle because they had to mix something into the plastic to give it this gold color, and it usually made the plastic a little more frail. It actually kind of looks like more of a plug that would go into an outlet. Don't, whatever you do, put that into an outlet, and don't do it saying that I told you to do that. This does spin, again, using the VAC chrome finish, and you can also put that into his hand. Now, the thing about it is he does have the bracelet right here, so if you are planning to put this into his hand, if you put it far enough down that it fits around his hand like this, then it's going to have a tough time to try to fit around the bracelet. It just gives you just the right amount of clearance. But if it was any bit higher up, there's no way that the shield would be able to attach in place. Now, if you did want to have the shield, say, on the other side, just attaching this right now, you can go ahead then and do the exact same thing then on the other side. Just attach it now into his hand instead. But the problem with this is you're going to have a little more of a harder time getting this around He-Man's hand and also clipping it around his hand that way. You can kind of hold it this way, but as you can see, like, to have his hand straight, you kind of have to pull this, get the handle around, sort of twist it, but then even then it's not going to be able to fit around his wrist. That's probably why it's supposed to really go on this side. But at least, if you do then swap the hand out, you can have the spinning mace on that side. All of this will, of course, be made available if they include an extra hand, which they do. They do come included with a gripping hand. So if you did want to swap He-Man's hands out, just wiggle the hand out and remove it. Now, unfortunately, what it is going to mean, though, is that when you are removing the hand, you're going to have then the same problem with him holding the shield properly. Again, if you take the shield, you have to kind of, like, this one works a little bit better. I don't know why this one works a little bit better than the other side, but you have the gripping hand there also on that side, too. The last of his accessories the figure comes included with is more of a modernized head sculpt. It's not that different. I'm going to put the figure down here right now from the new Eternian He-Man. The only thing that's really different between the two is they didn't actually paint the interior of the tongue. See, this one does have the red on the inside of his mouth. Looks actually like his mouth is bloody. This one doesn't have it. The hair seems to be the same. The face also looks to be the same. If you didn't want to, I suppose, use it with this body, you probably could easily just pop this off and replace it with this head sculpt instead. If you didn't want the bloody mouth, that is. To change the head out, it's super easy. You're just going to just pop the head off the ball joint. I did that so quick, you almost even missed it. That's what the alternate head sculpt looks like. I feel I'm leaning more towards the idea of actually displaying these figures with classic-looking He-Man head sculpts. But there's one there available if you did want that instead. I know, we've eaten up so much time. You guys did definitely want to see the way the gimmick worked. The gimmick, the way it works, is that the body spins. And when it spins, the arms move back and forth. It looks actually more that He-Man is dancing than anything else. There's two ways you can do this. If you look to the back here, there's a disc or a little rigid ringlet here that you put your finger across. And this allows you to be able to spin it back and forth. The problem with, I've noticed at least this, every time you do it, the hand always ends up hitting my fingers. If you want faster speed, and that's actually the way it's advertised in the packaging, you can hold to the back here and do the exact same thing by spinning this back and forth. Now, how that works with taking then the mace, go ahead and just plug this into his hand once again. It's not going to really change the shield, nor is it going to change the mace, but just to show you what it looks like with both the weapons in his hands. Plug that in. Just to spin it, I mean, it's literally just He-Man doing the exact same thing now with weapons in his hands. Does it change anything? I mean, yeah, I guess the speed of moving it back and forth somewhat rotates the shield and somewhat spins the mace, but not enough. Not really enough. You see what I mean? Okay, so let's go ahead and put those accessories to the side. Getting a closer look now at He-Man. Of course, you got classic-looking He-Man head sculpt. I wouldn't change anything, I think, to that. Even though I do appreciate the fact that they included the alternate head sculpt, not going to, I think, go that route when displaying the figure. One thing, again, I liked about He-Man here, the Flying Fist version, is, again, we're going to bring in a couple of the Battle Armor He-Man, for example, so you can see. They really need to go back and re-release Battle Armor He-Man with the proper proportions to his torso. You can see, like, his torso is way too wide. I mean, looking at the way do you lift He-Man? Oh, you do. Okay, never mind, you lift moons. This proportionately, Flying Fist He-Man works a lot better than what we got with Battle Armor He-Man. And to give you something a little bit closer in comparison, again, He-Man next to the Eternian Warriors He-Man, way too wide on the shoulders. I mean, really using this body and the way they've done the VAC Chrome to add and incorporate the spinning armor, they would have to be able to, because the original toy that didn't have wider shoulders was fine to do the job. They definitely need to go back and change Battle Armor He-Man, again, to give us proper proportions like this. The chrome finish does look nice on He-Man. You've got the He-Man red emblem here that sticks out, gold here on the sides of his shoulders, and he actually does have gold down below, just above his belt. What's rather interesting is the way they've done that, the belt, it looks like a crown, and this almost looks like a beard. Get your mind out of the gutter. Sort of looking at it just quickly at a glance, like if you were just to skim this through, it actually looks a little like King Randor's head. That's not really a place where you'd want King Randor's head. But yeah, having the crown right here and sort of it does look like his furry beard. I don't know why. Looking at this, it reminds me of King Randor. You know, get your head out of the gutter. The bracelets here, the gauntlets here on He-Man would have been the same. I'm just going to bring in the version 1 He-Man so you can see. The arms seem to be the same. The bracelets, though, done differently, done in that more red color. The loincloth and at least the belt, brown seems to be the same, but the top of the belt is now red instead of the traditional orange. And then the boots, you can see as well, they've made of slightly darker brown with a fur trim along the top done in white instead of that yellow. You can't really remove the body because, of course, it's all heavily influenced by the gimmick here. The gimmick also allows, because the arms rotate this way, part of the gimmick. If you did want to move the arms, they uncomfortably snap. And this reminds me of like the old Superpowers figures. The further the arms move up, though, obviously the higher reach that he has. He's confident. He's dry and secure. Raises his hand if he's sure. It's an old deodorant commercial from the 80s. But yeah, it just allows the hands to rotate a little higher up. You can also take the arms and snap them down a few notches. And that just means that He-Man's arms aren't going to come out as much. Speaking of which, looking at the articulation here on Flying Fist He-Man, his head rotates all the way around. Once again, it sits on a ball joint after all. Head does look down, it does look up, and it moves also back and forth. Just before we actually kind of go to the rest of the articulation here on the figure, one last thing I did want to mention is that the vintage head sculpt hasn't quite the same color as the rest of the body plastic. The plastic here seems to change a little bit, like his arms are more of a tan color, as his legs are, and then his neck is a paler color, and his face isn't the same color of tan as his arms. It's like they're using different plastics for all of his body. Anyways, for the rest of his articulation, there's technically a waist swivel, but it's geared heavily around the gimmick. He does have an elbow bend that bends the elbows, or bends the arms. You can also rotate the arms and rotate the hand, rotate and hinge those back and forth. And yeah, your traditional articulation here on any of the Master Universe figures. So you can move those back and forth and move them out this way. And there's also the knee bend too. Rotate the lower leg, rotate the boot, and you can also hinge the feet back and forth this way, and an ankle pivot going this way as well. I really like the look of this He-Man. I think at the time that I was getting out of the Master Universe figure line when I was a kid, this He-Man started popping up on shelves, because I always remember seeing it in a toy store, but I never really had, because I had already moved on to other things, really had no desired interest to get it. I'm glad that Mattel decided to re-release this guy, still incorporating a gimmick that was working so well in the original figure. They did it again. And again, looking at the figure, it serves even more as a bitter reminder of how I feel they dropped the ball when it came to, I'm just going to move this guy over, move this guy over, and move this guy in. How they really, I feel, dropped the ball once again when we looked at the Battle Armor He-Mans. Their torsos, beating a dead horse, way too wide. If they could somehow find the means, a happy medium, and maybe get away from this, getting closer to like that, and having the still spinning gimmick in the front of his torso, I think we'd have a much better Battle Armor He-Man. Spinning Flying Fist He-Man. I feel there's spinning somewhere in his name. Flying Fist He-Man, actually, I think is the blueprint for the way that Mattel really should have done Battle Armor He-Man in the first place. To retain the same gimmick as the original 80s toy, Mattel had to sacrifice some of the articulation here on Flying Fist He-Man. So when you're comparing him with the other He-Man from this same line, you'll notice he does come a little short when it comes to waist articulation, or shoulder articulation. The waist, of course, heavily influencing the gimmick. You're going to be spinning that back and forth to operate his arms. And of course, when it comes to his shoulders, you can still move his shoulders. So that's not 100% true. But every single time that you are moving his arms up, you're going to be hearing that ratcheted click. And it just means his arms are going to be swinging a little higher the next time you decide to rotate his waist. Now, I don't mind the occasional figure from the Master Universe Origins line having a gimmick. Because, I mean, they did really do away with the swinging waist in the first place with the Origins line. To then bring it back a little bit here with Flying Fist He-Man doesn't bother me at all. In fact, Terror Claw's Skeletor will be also having something quite similar when we have a look at him separately. The figure also keeps the same type of accessories that the original toy had, right down to the spinning mace. Now, the spinning mace I did mention did have one notable orb. You can see it right now that has more of a matte gold. You'll notice also on the other side that it's solid because there's a weight inside of it. That helps to actually spin the mace around. It adds a little bit of extra weight to the spin. And that's probably one of the reasons why they made it a matte gold in the first place, to incorporate the molded inside weight. The figure also does have the shield. He does have a power sword, but really for the fact that all the other He-Man have had power swords in one way, shape, or form, I'm not going to probably display Flying Fist He-Man at all with a power sword. It would have been nice that they would have widened the clip on the back of his torso to accommodate, though, the power sword, that if you aren't going to be displaying the figure with it, at least there was a place to store the power sword for the time being. Other than that, though, I really like the look of He-Man, and I like the fact that this figure keeps the gimmick in place while not altering the proportions of his body. I'm looking right now over at Battle Armor He-Man. I'm also looking at you, new Eternian Warriors, whatever you guys were called, the Eternian Warrior He-Man that had the scars all over his body. Both of you need to take an example here from Flying Fist He-Man of how to incorporate the gimmick without altering his body. So he still looks like he fits in with the rest of the He-Man figures we've already had a look at. What do you guys think, though, of Flying Fist He-Man? Not a bad looking figure, is it? Let me know down below in the comment section. And if you, by the way, are new to this channel, you're enjoying the content that you're seeing, and also love He-Man, you may not, if you're also new, may not also know that I've been looking at He-Man for a while now. So popping up at the very end of this video will be a playlist of all the Master Universe figure reviews that I've done over the last little while. I think we've looked at almost everything that Mattel has been putting out as of late. But yeah, if you are new here, first of all, hit the subscribe. That is the subscribe button. But after all, hit the bell notification so you're going to get those reminders every single time a new video is going to be coming up. And keep your peepers peeled, because while we have wrapped up the review for Flying Fist He-Man, the review of Terror Claws Skeletor will in fact be right around the corner. Stay tuned for that. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.